Welcome to A City in Motion. I'm your host, Jeremiah LaDuca, and today we have Debra Johnson, CEO and General Manager of RTD, a transit veteran, trailblazer, and first woman to lead one of the nation's most complex regional transit systems. With a career built on a deep passion for equity and access, Debra has dedicated her work to ensuring that public transportation serves everyone. Today, she sits down with us to share her vision for the future of transit and what it truly means to move a community forward. In this episode, we're diving deep into the world of public transportation, what it means, who it serves, and why it matters. We'll cover RTD's biggest projects reshaping Denver's transit landscape, how fare equity and youth programs are changing lives, the power of public and private partnerships, and what it takes to make transit not just functional, but desirable. This is a conversation about leadership, community, and building cities that work for all people. Good morning/afternoon. Thank you for coming on The City in Motion. I'm Jeremiah LaDuca, and today we have Debra Johnson, who is currently the CEO and General Manager for RTD, and I will be asking her a few questions today. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, Jeremiah. I appreciate the opportunity and look forward to engaging.
Yeah. So first, before the boardrooms and the public meetings, what was your earliest memory of public transportation? And what was one moment that made you realize that this wasn't just a career path, but a true passion?
Well, my earliest reflection on public transportation was utilizing what we called the city bus while I was growing up in Fresno, California.
Yeah.
It basically enabled me to be independent and be free. And what I mean by that is get to different places and hang out with my friends, and recognizing that it is a vital connector for those that don't have means to drive, have their own automobile, and basically be able to still access opportunities. I pride myself on saying oftentimes that public transportation is the great societal equalizer. I utilize that phrase intentionally because while we weren't all born on a level playing field, in order to take advantage of opportunities for one's betterment, first you have to access those opportunities. And that's where public transportation comes in, because it's a vital public service for any thriving community. And I believe the second part of your question is, at what point in time did I realize the importance of public transportation?
Yeah, as a passion.
As a passion. Well, for me, getting back to what I just said, it's the great societal equalizer. There are so many individuals that are reliant on public transport. And oftentimes we, as individuals that work in the public sector, may look at the individuals that are utilizing it as the means to leverage statistics and metrics for the sole purpose of garnering attention, perhaps, or grant opportunities for certain purposes within a municipality or a region or something of the like. For me, I can recall I was working at a transit agency and had the opportunity to work on a transit network restructuring. And there was a certain bus route that we were going to implement. This individual came over to me by virtue of me being a representative of the resident transit agency at the time. And she was like, if it wasn't for the service, I wouldn't be able to get to my job. I would have quit, because there's no way I would be able to make this long trek along 405, which is, a major highway in Los Angeles County. That could be quite detrimental for some when you sit in it for hours on end and only go several miles. And that was critically important, and really gets back to what I started the conversation with about public transportation being the great societal equalizer. It provides access to opportunities. And this individual, who was living in one city, living in Long Beach, was able to have a job at the University of California, Los Angeles, by virtue of Long Beach Transit starting services that was going into Westwood Village where UCLA is. And so
Yeah.
that for me, while that happened probably about 10 years ago, while I was passionate, it more or less amplified the work that I was doing, because oftentimes there will be a myriad of critics talking about what it is that needs to happen, but not really understanding what goes into planning transit services and then deploying
Yeah.
them. And when you think about it through an historical lens, recognizing that just February 4th was Transit Equity Day, that public transport is interwoven into the historical elements of the United States, especially when we think about the civil rights movement. And I talk
Yeah.
about that because with the advent of the interstate system in the 50s during the Eisenhower era, excuse me, that interstate highways bifurcated communities and separated them. And
Mm.
those that were left behind were cut off from communities. But then again,
Yeah.
the superhero that remains is, in most instances, the rubber tire caped hero, which is
Mm.
a bus system. And so for
Yeah.
me, that comes full circle as to why I'm passionate about what it is, because clearly transportation systems that are interwoven in the fabrics of the community are ensuring the vibrancy of said community by having their residents and visitors alike be able to move about freely and independently.
That's so good. I really like that. Yeah, that's like thinking about like the areas that were reconnected later on and giving people access all together. You don't not all the time. A lot of agencies don't have the money for an entire rail line, but being able to put a bus rapid transit can really help out a lot of those things and fill those gaps in the areas that a highway was built through a community. In Atlanta specifically, the Stitch was something that they're putting together right now,
Mhm.
and it was a highway that went through them, and they're building this beautiful bridge to go over, and it's going to be environmentally great. Putting more oxygen in the air and while also connecting these two communities that never really had that connection in like a very stylish form. So that's always good to hear, and I love to hear examples of that. Um, but yeah, I guess moving on to your like leadership and experience, you've worked with multiple DOTs across the country. What's one lesson that you learned from those partnerships that fundamentally changed how you lead? And does that show up in your work at RTD today?
It does. And just clarification, I've worked at transit agencies, no departments of transportation. Well, early on, I worked as a consultant for Caltrans, which is the state of California's Department of Transportation. But yes, I have had
Yeah.
an opportunity to work for 7 transit agencies directly. And when you see
Um,
one transit agency, you see one transit agency. And what is incredibly important to me in reference to leadership and competencies, it's being intentional and purposeful. And I say
mm,
that because we are people moving people. And without our customers, and I qualify individuals that utilize transit as being customers because we provide a vital service. And
mm,
oftentimes people will qualify those individuals as riders. I think about one riding a bike, riding a scooter, but when you are actually paying money and you're engaging with an individual who is taking great pride in operating a transit vehicle, greeting them, providing them with vital information, that's really a
yeah.
customer centric type of engagement. And we want to
Okay.
leverage that experience. And so when I talk about leadership, it's recognizing that people that comprise the agencies for which I've had
Mm,
an opportunity to work, uh, to manage, to lead, to collaborate with those
yeah.
that comprise the agency. It's about ensuring that everybody knows that they're a valued contributor. I often tell my teams that I equate what we do to be analogous to putting together a jigsaw puzzle, regardless of the size of the puzzle, meaning it could be 100-piece puzzle or it could be a 10,000-piece puzzle. Every puzzle piece has to be in its right place, or that box top cover isn't realized, regardless of the shape or size. You would see
Mhm.
a hole within that puzzle. And so
Yeah.
that's where I see the various aspects of people that come together that do this critical work, because
Yeah.
we have to appreciate and recognize the value that they contribute. For me as a leader, I want to ensure that I am maximizing on their potential. I need to
Mm.
provide the resources where they can be their ultimate best. And I have
Yeah.
to ensure that there's psychological safety for those individuals to be able to step into themselves to do the best work they could possibly do without fear of judgment if they have
Yeah.
ideas. And so it's fostering an environment where people can do their ultimate best, but being highly communicative in the process, and basically instilling within those individuals critical training components to enable them to be the best version of themselves for those customers that are utilizing our systems.
Yeah. That's awesome. And I guess even just going off of that too, there was a quote I found. I was given a book after I graduated from Fordham, from my track coach actually, and it was Eaters Eat Last, by Simon Sinek.
Mhm.
And one of the quotes he said, he was like, leadership is not about being in charge, it's about taking care of those in charge. And in public transportation, you're taking care of entire communities, many of whom you're not going to meet every single person. But how do you stay grounded in that responsibility and share moments when that philosophy can be tested? Um, yeah,
I'm smiling because prior to joining this podcast, I had an opportunity to engage with a cross section of team members here at RTD.
yeah,
And what I was telling them, what gives me great joy is having the opportunity to be able to have conversations with people that make up the agency, because it was
yeah,
cross disciplines that were represented. I had, communications professionals in there, individuals that are leading paratransit, folks from IT, folks that are dealing with our procurement and parts and supply chain,
wow,
individuals within operations that are training new team members that are coming in. And
yeah,
what I shared is, so it brings me great joy and grounds me, is being able to have dialogue. But when there's a lot of ancillary noise, and what I mean by that, be it the media or different people that have opinions, perceptions, and attitudes about what RTD is, that I always
mm,
find great peace looking outside the window and seeing our vehicles traverse the arterials. I
yeah,
can go down to a light rail station or a commuter rail station and see the people that are getting on the system. It basically reminds me the work that I am doing with the support of the people that comprise this agency is helping to move this region. And
mm,
that is what brings me back full circle. And then, more to the point, when I look at that, it reminds me of my critical role that I have at this agency. I happen to be the first woman to ever lead the Regional Transportation District since its
wow,
inception. From in
yeah,
1969, I took on the job 5.5 years ago. And
wow,
what I carry with me is this: I need to be the voice from the bus stop into the boardroom, because I am a transit customer. And I wouldn't be sitting
mm,
here, Jeremiah, engaging with you today if I wasn't a proud product of public transportation. So that's
yeah,
what keeps me grounded.
I love that. That's so good. And I think like when you're in the system and it becomes like a vital, opportunity for you to get to where you're going, before while you're growing up, even if it's high school, college, even you're starting your first job and you have access to one, once you're using that every day, it becomes a pillar in your whole life. And you think about like the big things people need, like food, water, shelter, access, all those things are connected by transportation and being able to have like a good some sort of experience in that system personally. I think that really like grounds you into, the work you're able to do. There's things you'll see, an engineer might be like, we have to do it this way, it has to be this big. And you're like, but, are we thinking about the community here? Who's going to be using that? What are they going to, is right here the actual right location? Is it going to bring the most people apart? This community might have, elderly, is it ADA compliant? There's things that you can bring in because you walked those steps, before and got to see how that turned out. So yeah, I really like that.
You
And
just made me
then,
think of something I often
yeah,
say, as long as there's people on this planet, there's going to be a need for healthcare, education, sanitation, and transportation. It
mm,
may look different than what we know it to be today, but we're still
yeah,
people and we have needs, and we're going to have to move to and
yeah,
fro wherever that is. It could be automated, it may not be in certain elements of things in the very near term, because what we learned several years ago by virtue of being sequestered with COVID, that we are human
yeah,
beings and we crave that social interaction with other people. And that is
yeah,
very intricate to who we are and how we're wired. So I
yeah,
appreciate you saying that. And you were talking, I was like mind meld here, because that's exactly what I believe as well.
yeah. That's so good. And then, yeah, moving on, RTD is undertaking some transformative projects right now. The Colfax BRT, the Downtown Rail Reconstruction Project, comprehensive fair and equity study, which we'll get to in a second. These aren't just infrastructure projects; they're about who gets access to opportunity, like we were talking about. Walk me through some of those visions, having those specific projects, and how did all those pieces fit together to reshape, the transit access and equity in Denver.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'll start with the downtown rail reconstruction project because that's critically important. And I speak from the place of ensuring that I am being a good fiscal steward of taxpayer
Hmm.
dollars. So RTD's inaugural light rail line in downtown Denver opened on October 7th, 1994.
Wow.
So basically, we have our oldest part of our network 31 years of age. And when you think
Wow.
about rail and useful life, we need to ensure that we are making good on the investments in which the taxpayers entrusted those that were leading RTD and currently are leading RTD, to ensure that we are optimizing our assets for future generations. So with that as a backdrop, looking at the downtown rail reconstruction project, it was not a popular choice that I made. What we had been doing as an agency, be it good, bad, or indifferent, uh, taking out certain segments of rail. This is embedded track in downtown Denver, whereby you have a plethora of different vehicles traversing the light rail tracks, i.e., garbage trucks, articulated buses,
Hmm.
standard single occupant vehicles, and things of the like. And we really couldn't see from the naked eye the impacts to our rail network because they are embedded, within the asphalt. And we had done some work on a certain segment because we noticed a defect, by virtue of not having it, be a grade where you could see ballast and things of the like. We really needed to get in and understand what was happening. So working in conjunction with our partners of the city and county of Denver, and call them out specifically because RTD doesn't own the infrastructure, i.e. the arterial,
Gotcha.
that our trains are traversing and things of the like. It was a true partnership in reference to getting permits and things of the like, and trying to minimize impacts to the customers, whereby we could increase our reliability by ensuring that we had infrastructure in place that could lend itself to not have unplanned interruptions moving forward.
Yeah.
So we were
100%.
successful 2 summers ago, by virtue of doing one critical piece, as we call the downtown loop, doing the various work at the intersections, and replacing that rail. I'm proud to say that we commenced that work after Memorial Day and finished before Labor Day, minimizing
Wow.
those impacts, working in partnership with our city colleagues and ensuring that
Hmm.
we weren't impeding any work that was impeding any activities that were happening in the city around, like, the Independence Day holiday. And going
Hmm.
forward, we just did another segment that commenced after Labor Day of 2025 and finished right the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and everybody was thankful, of course, that we were able to get in and do that work in an expeditious fashion, whereby we did a straightaway section of the network um, under budget and before the allotted time in which we anticipated, because we said it would be 84 days. The reason I call out the time period is because we are in an environment that has 4 seasons. It's been a little different this year in reference to us not getting the traditional Colorado type snow that we would get.
Yeah.
Have to be intentional and purposeful when we go forward with work. We have 3 other phases that are underway. We're working with our contractor right now, basically sequencing that work because we want to take advantage of shutdowns that we have by doing other aspects of work that may not be attributable to the 30-year-old rail network, but other work that may need to be done. From like, a signaling perspective or signage or things like of the like, or, redoing some overhead catenary wiring and those types of things. We're trying to be intentional. And it's really working with all of our partners so we can be highly communicative. And then what's critically important is looking at how we do our service changes. We do 3 each year, and ensuring that is baked into our schedule, and doing some rerouting of our rail network so we're not impacting our customers when we're trying to ensure the longevity of the system for future generations. So that is something that is key. You broached the question, the Colfax Bus Rapid Transit project that's underway. Yeah. That is a project that is being led by the city and county of Denver for the vast majority of the project. Then it crosses into the city of Aurora. It's a partnership in which RTD is participating, as well as the Colorado Department of Transportation as well. And what's critically important is that while the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure within City and County of Denver is building the project, it's a partnership and will be operated by RTD. Colfax is the longest contiguous business corridor in the United States, and it actually is home to our most heavily used bus route, which is the 15. And it was such a vital corridor for candidacy for support from the Federal Transit Administration by virtue of the throughput. So we're excited about that project. I would say key aspects of the project are about halfway done. There's arches that will create the brand for the Colfax BRT, which has been named Links. And we're looking to have that project completed like in Q2, early Q3 of 2027.
Oh, that's awesome. It's coming up very soon. That's awesome.
Be here before we know it.
Yeah. So yeah, you talked about the rail. So I wanted to talk about the A line as well. Has been such a vital connector for Denver, bringing people to and from the airport, linking neighborhoods along the way. We have our motto. It's not as connective, but there's one thing it does really well is get people to the airport. And so I really appreciate this too. Being someone that was going to Georgia Tech, it was right in Midtown, very easy to get on and get off. So I know how great for students and anybody that's, lives near the network can easily get to the airport. So that's really important for a lot of communities. What makes you most proud about that line, that, on what you achieved, and how do you see it continually evolving over time and becoming more reliable, more accessible? I don't know if there's any expansions or whatnot, but how that might change in the future.
Yeah, so one thing about the A line, it's a commuter rail line, and unlike most traditional commuter rail systems throughout the country that traditionally, I'll say prior to COVID, and I don't like saying prior to COVID because, that was, 6 years ago. But the reason I broach it is because commuter rail was designed to bring people from outlying areas, suburban areas, into a central business district or into, a major metropolitan area. And generally that was in and out by virtue of what we will qualify as peak commute times. With
Mm.
the A line, we operated on 15-minute headways, unlike your traditional commuter rail. During the
Yeah.
course of the pandemic, um, the A line basically retained a large portion of its transit utilization during that time in comparison to other commuter rail lines around the country and its 30 plus commuter rail systems that we have here in the US. What is notable about the A line is that it originates from intermodal transit hub within our network, being the historic Denver Union Station, and then terminates at the country's sixth busiest airport in the world. And
Yeah.
Denver International Airport happens to be a large economic driver for the state of Colorado. It's the largest employer. And so when we think about people not only utilizing it to do business within the city and county of Denver in particular, it has been I would say, a beacon for businesses to want to come to Denver by virtue of the ease of access to get from
Mm.
the airport into the central business district. And that is something in and of itself. And more to the point, talking about first, the A line is part of a public-private partnership, actually the first in the transit space in the entire country. And
Wow.
just in April, we'll be celebrating the 10th year of the A Line's operation here within the RTD network.
Wow. That's awesome. Yeah, it's cool to hear about like a little bit of like how it came about and I even just going off of that, being able to collaborate, making something a public-private partnership, how important is that, when you're building, these large projects that can be very expensive, involve a lot of coordinating and whatnot. I just wanted to hear this was a little extra one for A-Line.
Yeah, so as part of the public-private partnership, it was the A line, we have the B line and the G line. The B line, part of that overarching public-private partnership, um, is in the northwest portion of our service area, and the G line serves a community known as Arvada. And there
Mm.
are lessons learned, good, bad, or indifferent, because those three lines are actually operated by our concessionaire. And there
Mm.
is an agreement that was put into place that doesn't sunset until 2042. And so while
Mm.
there are opportunities to have a project finance, there are some other opportunities that have presented themselves and some challenges as well as we move forward that could be pain points because by virtue of our vehicles being branded as RTD, the customer, if in fact we have a service disruption or things of the like, RTD is ultimately responsible, and we take great pride in partnering with our concessionaire. But there are some instances by virtue of our concessionaire agreement whereby RTD, as the transit agency, does not have the autonomy to step in and correct some elements of our daily service delivery. And so there's
Mm.
pros and cons with any type of delivery model, be it a construction delivery model or be service delivery model. And I think if anything,
Mm.
one aspect of what we have garnered through this relationship is that we have to be highly communicative, in which we are, and that we
Yeah.
have to be intentional as it relates to our transportation network and what that might mean and how service is delivered holistically. And it's really coming into play now as RTD is engaging with different entities with the state of Colorado as we look at an intercity passenger rail service that we refer to here as joint service. By virtue of having a starter service that would service Denver Union Station and go up north to Fort Collins, by virtue of having this joint service because we could capitalize on efficiency. So leveraging lessons learned for the betterment of creating a plan going forward for other rail options is something that has been pivotal as we move forward, thinking about additional mobility options to the Front Range.
Yeah. Wow. Very, very great. So going back, I remember I previewed the fair and equity study that was done I wanted to go a little bit more into that. So generally, this whole going beyond just pricing, it helps get access to opportunity in Denver, whether it's students getting to class, a family, stretching every dollar, or seniors and fixed incomes. Fare structure touches every socioeconomic group differently. When you think about this study and its potential to open doors for people across all income levels, whose fares comes to mind? This is particularly rider or a community story or something that maybe that came away. I know you shared a story before, um, but yeah, just I wanted to highlight that one too. And I know you have something else that actually came up more recently regarding that came out of this fair study.
Yeah. So thank you for the question, Jeremiah. When I came to the Denver metro region, one thing's for certain, I pride myself in being an avid transit customer, and more to the point, being a transit practitioner. It was difficult for me to discern what fare I needed to pay when I was out at Denver International Airport. And when I
Mm,
was doing informational interviews with various constituencies, i.e., the employees that comprise the agency, our union leadership, uh, community stakeholders, members of RTD's board of directors, and other elected officials, it appeared that there was great angst relative to RTD's fare structure. And it was expensive relative to the type of services that we're providing. And so that really was the vehicle, no pun intended, relative to me honing
mm,
in a little deeper, trying to ascertain, let's, minimize these pain points for our customers. And so that
mm,
led to a fair study and equity analysis, one that was done in a very in-depth fashion by virtue of
mm,
leveraging the 21 safe harbor languages that we have within the Denver metropolitan area. And just for everybody's edification, RTD service area is 2,345 square miles. We service 40 municipalities within 8 counties. So you can imagine that there's different customer needs and different demographics related to those customer segments. And
mm,
what was critically important as we think about people utilizing public transport by virtue of getting to key activity centers, be they institutions of higher learning, um, employment sites, grocers, and I would say social activity venues, be it Empower Field at Mile High, where the Broncos play, or Ball Arena, where the Nuggets play. We are critically important. And so I provide that context to then say what we learned through this very in-depth engagement process is that people need to get to where they need to go and shouldn't need a decoder ring to figure out what fare they need to pay. More
mm,
specifically, you made mention in your comments when you were posing questions to me about, Atlanta and the stitch and what's happening relative to the environment. I really
yeah.
believe in investing in creating a transit customer for life, because a transit customer for life is usually rooted into being a good environmental citizen. And so one
Mm,
critical aspect that I basically brought with me by virtue of my experience at other transit agencies is investing in future generations of transit customers, i.e., our youth. And when you
mm,
think about youth ridership, it's critically important because people need to get to school. But we all come from different backgrounds and we all have a story of which we know nothing about. And for a
mm,
household that is trying to make ends meet, trying to feed one's family, or deciding if they have enough, you know, monies to provide for somebody's transit fare, we should take that out of the
mm,
equation. So a program that I'm extremely proud of is our Zero Fare for Youth program. So
mm.
youth under the age of 19 can utilize RTD without paying a fare. And what we have
Wow.
learned is that the truancy rate for Denver public schools have gone down. I heard this directly from a representative from Denver Public Schools. when we were collectively testifying before the Colorado State Legislature, because we were
Mhm.
able to get some funding from the state of Colorado to support the program when we initially did a pilot. More to the point, recognizing that this was a demonstration project when we started, was able to get a waiver from the Federal Transit Administration so we could actually do the pilot in reference to the fare for more than 6 months, considering that an academic school year is longer than 6 months. We were able to do it for 12 months so we could get data to make informed decisions as we go forward. When the board of
Wow.
directors adopted the fare structure back in July of 2024, that basically was effectuated as of January 1st, 2025. Zero fare for youth was incorporated into that program. Another key aspect, as I talked about the various demographics with 21 safe harbor languages, we understand that oftentimes individuals may not have monies to get to where they need to go. They could need some social services. So through the course of our fair study and equity analysis, we developed a program which we call our our transit access grant program, whereby
Mm.
RTD has set aside $1 million in its operating budget, and we do a call to different nonprofit entities and social service agencies for them to put forward their statement of need relative to helping their clientele or their customer base with transit fares. And just on February 16th, we announced those entities that have been selected for 2026 to receive these grants from us that will enable them to have transit fares for their client base so they can get the services in which they need. And so that's something that we're very proud of, because not everybody is a discretionary transit customer. There are people that need transit to get to critical elements, or when I say get to critical elements, I meant to say to get to critical activity centers that are paramount to their livelihood. And so
Yeah.
basically, considering that RTD is interwoven into the fabrics of the communities that we serve, this is how we make good on our mission, which is to make lives better through connections.
I really like that. And yeah, I guess building on that too, thinking about the the young children, the people going to school, taking a step back for the next generation of leaders for transit. It could be, anyone from an engineer who's working on the rails to someone in the managerial role. What's some advice that you would give to other transit leaders in today, 2026, to think forward about how to, increase capacity, building new projects that may be voted down a lot, in the beginning. I know Atlanta specifically, there's so many, it's a huge political thing, which I'm sure you're very familiar with. Just getting new projects up and getting them going and getting support, and sort of just keeping this alive. There's been a lot of people just forget about it. We see a lot of, statistically too, a lot of young people do want transit. They want to have access. They want to even, work in these positions, and there's just not a lot of work for it. And it makes it hard for some people. So I don't know, is there any advice that you would give, just to help motivate and just keep transit alive in areas that, may not have as much public support or whatnot?
I would say for anyone, particular in the transportation space, but this is relevant to any young person who has a desire to make a difference. Understand what your why is and don't lose sight of that.
Mm,
As I stated before, I really believe that public transportation is the great societal equalizer. I
yeah.
believe that I have to be the voice from the bus stop into the boardroom, and more to the point, recognizing that public transportation, the critical aspect of what it does for the vitality of a community, to think that I am the first woman to ever lead this agency
Mm,
is really disappointing. And what I mean by that, while this study is nearly 10 years old, Pew Research Center basically did a study in 2017, and it centered upon the most reliant transit customers across the country, and they're single women of color. However, when you
Wow.
look around the country as a whole, you don't necessarily see that demographic in a space of leading transit agencies. And so for me,
Yeah.
what's vitally important is to ensure that I'm creating avenues and creating forums and leaning in for the betterment of future generations. Hence, that's why when you reached out to me on LinkedIn, I always take the time and create the space to engage, because if a tree falls in a forest and you didn't hear or see it fall, how do you know it actually has fallen? And so we can't
Mm,
be too busy to stop and make time to talk about the critical aspect of public transportation and be an evangelist or an advocate for that going forward. So I would cheer for those future leaders to basically reach out, have your voice be heard, put forward requests to those that are in positions of leadership so you can garner an understanding of what it may be like to have your questions answered, and don't shy away from that, because I'm a firm believer that closed mouths don't get fed. None of us get to positions
mm,
by ourselves, and we have to realize that we are better together and have
yeah.
that collective voice. And when in doubt, reach out to someone. And so that's what I
Yeah.
would offer up, and recognize that, while there could be certain pathways to get into the public transportation sector or transportation sector as a whole. You don't have to be an engineer. I'm not an engineer. I
Mm,
basically started out as one that did government relations, but I was intellectually inquisitive. And so when I
yeah.
was advocating for certain projects, writing reports to Congress back in the 90s when I was working on the BART extensions, I needed to link
Wow.
in and I needed to understand what false work meant. I was writing responses to comments as it related to the NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, or CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, aspect when we were looking at locally preferred alternatives. So don't let that be a hindrance. If you're curious, then ask the questions that can put you in the appropriate rooms to be the best version of yourself with the betterment of helping others.
I really like that. It's like so powerful. Just makes me smile. Like there's so much there. And I think even just communication, I know we've talked about communication a lot, bringing these things to larger platforms and getting the word out, really here and putting your first foot forward, your best foot forward. I think there's so many things that is always going through my mind, like I should be doing this, I should be doing this, I want to be doing this. And sometimes just like the communication, having voices heard, we're not, every context is different. Every state in the US, is dealing with completely different things. And, we want this knowledge spillover. We want, people to learn from other people that have already done this so many times, so great. And I think a lot of that is really, really good. And yeah, I really appreciate that. Um, and this is more of a fun question I had. Thinking about RTD and future projects, if you had unlimited resources, no political boundaries, complete freedom to execute some sort of vision for transit over the next decade, what would you build? What would you change? Well, I don't know. Is there something specific that you would put forth?
To have a real vital comprehensive transportation network. And what
Mm,
I mean by that is that having the mindset and working with municipalities to have a transit first priority perspective
yeah,
is critically important. There's no reason why a bus shouldn't have priority when operating in the central business district. A bus should not be sitting at a stoplight. A light rail
yeah,
transit should not be sitting at a stoplight. We're trying to entice people to get out of their cars so we can reduce our carbon footprint. So we
mm,
should be able to create a viable network where somebody sitting in a single occupant vehicle looks over and says, oh my gosh, that mass transit vehicle is moving. I shouldn't be in this automobile. I should be there. It should be an
yeah,
environment whereby one doesn't need to look at a schedule because you have some mass transit vehicle coming through every 5 minutes that's not being bunched up by virtue of being stopped at transit signals, because you have transit signal prioritization and preemption that really enhances the movement of people within densely populated areas, and then basically ensuring that there's ample resources so we can invest in the state of good repair. So we would always have state-of-the-art infrastructure at the ready that would minimize disruption to our transportation network. And then I would say another important piece of that is safe paths of travel. When you have individuals that have disabilities, or you have people that may not be as mobile, ensuring that you have the infrastructure whereby they can access mass transit with ease. That's what I see. It is creating a simplistic network for people to move about by virtue of having that sense of independence and not have to rely upon schedules and things of the like, because it is that broad connectivity where everybody is leaning in. And when I mean everybody, I meant public entities rallying around that transit reigns supreme and the automobile is secondary.
I love that. Yeah, I think the car dependence, I read a lot about it, listen to a lot about it, and it's very crazy to see how cities were just built, solely based on car dependence, no other plan, just
Mhm.
highways and whatnot. And, it sort of becomes, the pillar, and it did, fix a lot of problems back in the day. It was able to bring people way across the country, connect different states together, thinking about like being able to just move freight and whatnot. There is a lot of great things that it provides, but um, it's like now, thinking about the amount of volume of people using it and population increases, like we have to be innovative and think about new solutions and whatnot. And, creating a really expansive, well, maintained network, I think is such a good thing. Moving on, we have two more questions as we come to a close. One of the biggest things I talked with Paul Comfort about was just making transit sexy again. Like, what does that really look like? How does branding play into this and marketing? And I that was one thing we had talked about in one of our public engagement classes at Tech. It was like how are you going to present these ideas where people want to grasp it, want to be a part of that vision. One thing Paul Comfort shared was they were able to do a collaboration with Joe Flacco and get his face, throwing a football on the side of the bus. And I think that was just a really, really good thing. A lot of people attached to that. Football is such a staple in America. So, connecting those two, transit and football, I think was a really, really great, ordeal. And just even think about MARTA as well. We do a lot of, collaboration with Atlanta United and the Falcons and the Hawks and, all these different things where we're sharing, this is how you should get there. Don't worry about parking. There's a MARTA stop near you. And those collaborations, I think, make it come to life. Do you have any idea around that too, where how we can think about just making transit sexy again for the future?
Yes, I think if anything is demystifying what transit really is for those individuals, and you use some examples there. Traditionally, those are the discretionary customers, and they want to go to key activity centers for ease of access. And more important, if you're going to root on your favorite team, you may want to indulge in libations and things of the like. And it's like, leave the driving to us as we move forward.
Yeah,
And it's interesting that you're broaching that. I mean, with baseball season upon us, opening day is coming. We partner with the Rockies, and we have
yeah.
their mascot who will be out on opening day, and he rides our light rail system and is on commuter
Oh,
rail.
I love it.
And so that's incredibly important. Just last night at our RTD board meeting, members of my team presented to the board how we have been collaborating with certain event venues, in particular, working with, Ball Arena, that's home to the Colorado Avalanche and the Denver Nuggets, and Power Field at Mile High, home to the Broncos, Coors Field,
Hmm.
home to the Rockies. And then as we look at, professional soccer, and we have a new National Women's Soccer club that's coming to the area, ensuring that we're working in partnership so we can entice people to want to utilize the system. One key aspect is using ticket as fare. And what I mean by that, if you are buying a ticket to a Nuggets game, then having a partnership with RTD, your ticket to the basketball game would serve as your fare media. And so it takes
Wow.
that angst and trepidation about how do I figure about how to get on the system. More to the point as well, RTD, we just launched tap to pay. So you can use whatever's in your wallet. You can use Apple Pay, Google Pay, Samsung Pay to get on the system. So you're not trying to
Yeah.
figure out what the fare structure is as you move forward. And more or less, it's really working with different municipalities and elected officials, because oftentimes RTD and other transit agencies around the country get a bad rap in the sense that it may not be as safe. My personal security could be at risk. Anything that is happening within a municipality is going to spill over into transit because we're interwoven in the fabrics of the communities that we serve. And so this
Yeah.
misnomer about there was some kind of antisocial behavior that occurred on, a transit vehicle, in some instances that happens on the city street, but it is working
Yeah.
collectively to address that narrative, because it's all about people's perceptions, opinions, and attitudes. Because if someone had a bad experience that dates back 5 years ago, they're going to carry that forward and say, don't get on X system because it's not safe. It's really
Exactly.
ensuring that we are being highly communicative, using those various channels by virtue of branding the system in such a way, by working with known partners that can leverage how one gets to where they need to go, and then doing it with others. It's that whole notion of the restaurant on the corner. If in fact, Jeremiah, you told me to go eat at the restaurant on the corner and I had some trepidation, but I trust you and I like your taste, then I'm
Yeah.
inclined to go try it based on your experience. And that's what we need to do as transit customers, by being out in the community, by working with different sponsors and event organizers, and having that information be carried forward by a second party or a third party that will enable
Mm.
transit to look safe and sexy. Because
Yeah.
I enjoy going to a Broncos game, and if the Broncos are saying take RTD, then I should do that as opposed to paying $75 for parking.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's so good. And it's like there's people, there's a lot of people, celebrities, you know, people in political positions, they have a lot of power with their voice. So seeing them on these systems, using them, there's such a stigma for a while where it was like, I can afford a car. I don't need to take the transit. I can, and I think about that all the time. And I'll be driving, I remember going into New York, going into the city, stuck in traffic, and I just see the Metro North just whiz past me.
Yep,
I'm
yep,
like, I would have been
totally.
there an hour ago, and you think about these things. I'm like why am I even wasting my time? Like if I am, able to do that, I would hope I can make a, better decision on how I'm getting there, making sure I'm saving time. You always hear about all the studies about how much time, what can you do with all the time that you're by sitting in traffic at tech. There's on the planning side, there were so many. I remember reading through research articles about, the amount of, we can figure out how to go to Mars 3 times with all the time we're spending
In
sitting in
traffic, yes.
traffic.
Hmm.
So yeah, I always just think about the time there and really, who's advocating for it and who's in those positions where we can give them a voice, and just share their experience with transit. A lot of them may have used it, maybe they can't do it now. They're super busy. They're, have to need security and whatnot, to get from place to place. But I think it's interesting to think about, who's advocating and who's being, part of those voices. And yeah, lastly, this is also another fun one, but when you're not leading RTD, and you don't have you're home, you have less things to worry about. What are some guilty pleasures? It could be a cheesecake, I don't know, red velvet cake. I love strawberry shortcake. That's like the cake I get for my birthday every year.
Oh.
Do you have any guilty pleasures? It doesn't have to be food related, but
My guilty
yeah.
pleasure is Law and Order SVU. I will watch episodes. Last night, I got home from the board meeting. I needed to unwind
Yeah.
and turned on the TV. It was almost 9 o'clock, and I watched Law and Order SVU until 11:30 at night. It's really bizarre. It's my show. I love
I
Odafin
love it.
Tubola. I love, Captain Olivia Benson.
Yeah.
Um, you know what I mean? So that is my
I
thing.
love that.
Yeah, so that's what I do. That's how I like, and I read and I do other things, but you said my guilty pleasure. Oh yeah, I'll watch
Yeah.
Law and Order SVU like nobody's business.
I love that. And yeah, well, thank you for coming on today. It was a pleasure having you. Um, and yeah, hope to do this again at some point. If there's another study or a new line that comes out at some point, I would love to, help be a part of that voice to put that word out there and share with some people, this is a new connection. Let's see if you can, how you can fit that into your life. So yeah, well, just let me know.
All
I'm
right.
gonna,
Well, thank you so much, Jeremiah. I appreciate the
yeah,
opportunity to be able to engage with you today. And thank you so much for reaching out and for being so passionate about this industry that I have been a part of for 34 years.
yeah,
I think it's a dynamic industry and there's dynamic people that comprise it. And we are doing some great work moving people to and fro and unleashing them from their limitations. So thank you for
yeah,
your contributions. I really appreciate and value it.
no worries.
All
Thanks
right.
again.
All right. Take good
All
care.
right,
Bye-bye.
bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
That's a wrap on an incredible conversation with Debra Johnson. One thing is clear, public transportation isn't just about getting from point A to point B. It's about equity, access, and giving every person the opportunity to move through life with dignity. Whether it's free rides for youth, reimagining downtown rail, or simply making transit cool again, Debra and RTD team are proving that when we invest in transit, we invest in people. Transit for all, that's the mission. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next ride.